Welcome to the Book of Wretch, where stories of the macabre and supernatural are told. We ask all of the lost, the damned, and everything in between to join us for yet another spine-chilling tale. With that said, let's begin. It was tradition for the incoming seniors at Blight Bay High School to go to the house in the clearing. You could go any time between the last day of junior year and the last night before senior year. Everyone went. I never heard of anyone who had skipped the tradition. I didn't understand it. It was just something everyone did. My parents remembered doing it themselves. They told me about their adventures earlier that night, before they wished me luck and watched me leave. I went in late August, only a few days before school started. My group of friends had made a promise to go together, and we only had a few days to fulfill that promise. And in Blight Bay, you had to fulfill your promises. Sadie, catch up, you chicken. What are you scared for? Ricky called over his shoulder at me. We were just beyond the clearing, and I could see the house easily from where I stood, even though it was already getting dark. The house in the clearing was old, but it didn't look old. It felt old. No one ever went out there for any other reason, but the house looked remarkably in good shape. I hurried to catch up. Anne and Jenna were standing beside the front door, a faded green wooden door that was always unlocked. Shane pushed the door open. The girls were laughing as the five of us entered the house, but stopped as soon as we crossed the threshold. We split up almost immediately. I didn't know what we were supposed to do now that we were actually here, but each of us pulled out our phones, turned on our flashlights, and headed into different rooms. I went into the bathroom. The cabinet above what was left of the broken sink was crooked on the wall. The mirror was gone, probably grounded into dust and dirt that covered the floor. I reached up and grabbed the cabinet door and tried to pull it open, but the whole thing fell off its hooks and clattered onto the floor. Hey yo, what was that? Anne called out, her voice muffled even in that small house. It was me. Everything's okay, I called back, shining my light into the hallway, but no one appeared. I didn't even remember hearing footsteps, just wind blowing through an empty house. I turned back to the cabinet, but something was wrong. With it gone, I could clearly see the hole in the wall, carved into the rock behind the plywood and drywall. I held my phone up, trying to get a better look. There was a rock sitting on top of a small box. The outside of the box was cloth, torn in places, whether by animals or whether I don't know, but through the tears I could see the metal the box was made out of. I looked closer at the rock and saw strange pictures carved into it. I wondered how long they were there. I wondered who put them there. I heard voices, so I turned and glanced over my shoulder, expecting to see Ricky or Shane behind me. But there was nothing, just a barren room and empty shelves. I looked back at the box. I lifted the rock and set it aside, but without thinking, I opened the lid of the box. Everything became hot. My body felt like it was sinking into the sudden heat, and sweat broke down across my forehead and under my arms and on my back. It pressed down on me from every angle until I felt like I couldn't move. It sucked the air from my lungs, and I was left struggling for breath as it got hotter and hotter. And within a sudden moment, it was gone. I made the others leave soon after. They laughed at me for being afraid, and I couldn't force myself to tell them they were right. I didn't tell them about the box as we made our way home. I didn't tell them about the heat or the voices I think I heard. I just let them crack their jokes and went home with a promise to call Jenna in the morning. When I got home, Mom and Dad were still awake in the living room. "How did it go?" my dad asked, muting or turning off the TV as I walked by. I forced myself to shrug. I felt almost sick, probably a combination of the heat and the dust and just thinking about that box. Kind of dumb, bit of a waste of time, I added, hoping they wouldn't notice my voice shaking. "All that matters is you did it," my mom said, smiling. I headed for the shower and scrubbed away the sweat and dirt with cold water, but I swear I could still feel the heat under my skin. Sometimes I still feel it. I crawled into bed. I was wide awake, but my eyes ached to close. But I couldn't. I couldn't stop thinking about that box. Why was it there? Why was it seemingly so hidden, but so in the open? I laid there for hours, only falling asleep when the sun started to rise. It happened the next night, and the night after, and the night after. I always felt on edge, as if any second something would happen. After a few days, just when the thought of the house and the clearing and the rock and the box were fading, I began to feel a new sensation. It was not the anxious feeling I had managed to quell, but a heaviness across my shoulders and back and my chest. But even that first time I felt it, I wasn't afraid. It was like the first time I used a weighted blanket, like something was wrong, even though everything was all right. The feeling came and went throughout the days, and I never knew when to expect it. There was a thought I tried to push back. I had it that first night, but I forced my thoughts away from it as well as I could. It was easy in the daylight, where chores and friends kept it away. But at night, as I was trying to fall asleep, it came back easily. I didn't know anything about ghosts, or spirits, or demons, but I think something was in that box. And I let it out. Now I know how it sounds. I know I sound crazy. I know that, but it's true, and I have proof. The first time it happened was on my walk to school the first day back. There was money on the sidewalk, not crumpled, like it had fallen out of someone's pocket, but folded neatly and wrapped in a flowery scrunchie exactly like the one on my wrist. The one Anne made me a few months ago out of scrap fabric from her mother's closet. I bent down and picked up the money, but only to examine the scrunchie closer. I held it against mine and saw I was right. They were exactly the same. I tucked the money into my bag and planned to ask Anne about the fabric when I saw her. The second time was October. I hadn't been sleeping well again. My head always hurt and I was forgetting to write down assignments. With all the stress that came with senior year, I was just trying to get back into my usual groove. I was opening my binder when Mr. Handler asked us for our essays on gender stereotypes in Wuthering Heights. My heart sank and I felt sick. I didn't write down that assignment. I didn't write that essay. But there it was, in the left folder, stapled neatly in the corner. My name was on the paper. I removed it from my binder. It was right there. The girl in front of me grabbed it from my hands before I could look through it, and I watched wordlessly as it got passed to the front where Mr. Handler collected it. I didn't write it. I know I didn't write it, but something did, and it earned me a B+. After that, things escalated. There was a girl in my grade, Mindy. She was the center of our school's basketball team. For our entire lives, she had done whatever she could to make my life miserable. In elementary school, she teased me about my haircut and my lisp. In middle school, it was acne, and now it was just nasty names when we passed in the hallway. When I was 12, my parents decided I needed an extracurricular activity, so I ended up trying out for cheerleading. I assumed I wouldn't make it, and hoped that if I played up the embarrassed aspect of not getting on the team, Mom and Dad would go easy on me and not make me try for something else. Unfortunately for me, I made the team. Turns out I'm pretty good at jumping and spread eagles. It's one of the lowest requirements for cheerleading, but at Blight High, it was good enough for Coach Simmons. This also meant that I had to see Mindy at every basketball game. I hate to admit it now, but sometimes I wanted to see her fall. Not enough to get hurt, but just enough to stun her for a minute. Maybe take her out of a game or two. But nothing like what ended up happening. I was heading down the stairs for history. Mindy was heading upstairs, and she bumped into me hard enough for my books to fall out my hand. "Clumsy whore," she said loudly before continuing up the stairs. I tried to think of something, anything to say, but she was out of sight before I could. So instead, I gathered my books and headed for class, and I tried to ignore the heaviness that fell over my shoulders, but it felt even heavier than before. During class, there was a loud siren that stopped Mr. Bagley in the middle of his lecture. Our classroom faced the front courtyard, and Ricky, who was sitting by the window, shouted, "It's an ambulance." 10 minutes later, Mindy was wheeled out on a stretcher. Mr. Bagley tried to get everyone to focus on his PowerPoint on Mesopotamia, but no one paid him any attention. A few days later, it's all over school. Mindy fell down the stairs on the way to the bathroom and fractured her spine in several places. Mindy can no longer play basketball. Maybe not forever, but definitely for the foreseeable future. She has to sit out this season. She's lost any chance at a sports scholarship, and I want to feel bad. I do. But I don't. I didn't push her. I didn't bump into her. I was in class when she fell. It wasn't my fault. That night, when I felt the heaviness across my shoulders, I swallowed hard before I whispered, "Thank you." Nothing happened. I wasn't expecting anything, but I wanted to let whoever or whatever has been doing these things to know that I'm grateful. Also, it doesn't hurt to stay on its good side, if it has one. This last thing is what got me to start writing this. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't ask for what happened to happen. We were traveling out of state, the cheerleaders and the basketball team. Mindy was there, sitting in a wheelchair, and she was quiet. She's not used to sitting on the sidelines, and it's really affected her. And she hasn't said a word to me, good or bad. I thought about talking to her first, but I decided against it. After all, it wasn't my fault. The bus ride to the hotel was uneventful, except for one thing. I remember I turned to Jenna and said, "We didn't come all this way to not win." So when we were at the hotel and Coach Simmons received a phone call that caused her face to turn gray, the heaviness hit my chest again. I thought I knew what happened, but it ended up being so much worse. "Girls, listen up," Coach Simmons called out when she hung up. Her voice was tight. Everyone quieted down as we waited for her to continue. I felt like I could fold into myself from the weight. I didn't think it would follow me here. The game is canceled. We'll be heading home in the morning. The others jumped up, confused and sounding almost angry. "Why?" one of the girls demanded over the others. "There was an accident," Coach Simmons forced out. "Some of the girls from the valley, they didn't make it." There was more shouting and yelling, the voices mixing to just noise. I closed my eyes. I straightened myself, shaking my shoulders as if I could shake away the weight, but nothing happened. Coach Sims is trying to answer the questions the others are asking. I felt like I was about to throw up, and I didn't want to do it in front of almost 30 kids. I went back to my room. Jenna left the window cracked, and it was cold. My stomach started to settle now that I'm out of the room and away from the noise. I turned on the TV in my room, and there it was. The story of what happened to those girls from the Valley team. The bus they all were on somehow had a fuel leak. As the bus pulled into the gas station, some way, somehow, a flicker of fire combusted out of nowhere under the bus, and the bus exploded. 4 girls survived, but they were all paralyzed from the neck down and needed a ventilator for the rest of their life. The rest of the team, including the coach and bus driver, died in the most brutal way possible. The full video was on Live Leak, and let's just say that feeling sick to my stomach was an extreme understatement. I sat down on my bed, crossing my legs. I could still feel the weight on my back. I licked my lips, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Please don't kill anyone else." There was a pause. For the briefest of moments, I swore I thought something was going to appear or say something to me, but nothing happened, just silence. Then the weight is gone. I don't know if I upset it or if it can be upset. I can only hope this is the last time it will try to help me, or do what it thinks is helping me. I don't know if I can take much more of this, but if you take anything away from my story, please, if you ever see a rock with a strange carving on it, on top of a equally strange box in an empty house in the middle of a clearing. Maybe just leave it alone. So until next time, I hope you join us when we open the Book of Wretch yet again. But remember, be careful when you enter the mind of a wretched. You may just leave a wretch. Good night and pleasant nightmares.